It's time for Get the Lac Scoop, a podcast bringing you all the people and stuff you should know in the game of lacrosse. We take Lac seriously, but ourselves, not so much. Join hosts Big Dog and Jaybird and the biggest names in the game. Brought to you by J. McMahon Lacrosse. That's JML, skills, mindset, and Lax IQ training.
Ron Dalgliesh, the Big Dog, was a collegiate football and lacrosse player at Brown. He was also an assistant lacrosse coach and the executive director of the Sports Foundation.
And Jay McMahon, the Jaybird, a three-time All-American midfielder at Brown. He was a captain of the U.S. Junior National Team and is the founder of JML. And joining us in the studio, Steve Grisalfi, whose collegiate lacrosse career statistics equals 1 goal against Dartmouth.
Our first guest is the winner of 4 national championships at the University of Virginia, 2 Ivy League championships at Brown University, and 3 Coach of the Year awards in men's Division I lacrosse. He's a member of the board of Harlem Lacrosse and the Premier Lacrosse League, as well as the author of the book, I Hope You Will Be Very Happy, Leadership Lessons from a Lifetime in Lacrosse, available on Amazon. Please welcome U.S. Lacrosse Hall of Famer and current head coach of the Blue Ridge School's boys lacrosse team, Dom Starsia.
Hey, fellas, happy to be here.
Great. And Ron, you ready to introduce our next guest?
I am. Also joining us today, the current head men's lacrosse coach at the University of Virginia, Lars Tiffany. Lars is in his 7th season at UVA, where he's won 2 national championships. For the record, Dom, that's 2 behind you. He's won 2
forget, dog.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you don't, Dom. 2 ACC championships. Twice honored as ACC Coach of the Year. As we all know, he spent 10 years at his alma mater, Brown University, as the head coach, where he led the Bears to 4 Ivy titles and 3 NCAA tournament appearances, including the incredible run to the 2016 Final Four. Lars is also the head coach for the Haudenosaunee Nationals team, formerly known as the Iroquois Nationals, who will be competing in the upcoming World Games in June in San Diego, California. Lars, we really appreciate you joining us today as well.
It is wonderful to see you, Big Dog, see you, Jay. And this is exciting also to be, anytime I can be with Dom and talk lacrosse, it's fun and it's a growth experience.
Jay, I think we're already learning that we're going to have to tell Lars this isn't one of his 10-minute halftime interviews, that he's going to have to shorten it up a little. Dom, I thought your opening very appropriate in terms of its length.
Thanks for the guidance there, Ron. Nice. And we will pick up right where we left off with our special guests, coaches Dom Starsia and Lars Tiffany. This is part 2 of a 3-part series with these 2 legendary coaches. If you have not listened to Season 1, Episode 1, we strongly recommend you go back and do so. We will find our interview in progress. Now, I did want to get in, Lars, a little bit about your relationship with Dom. Like, as you're deciding to become a college coach, I know you were coaching at a prep school out in California, and tell us what it was like and what influence Dom had on you making that decision, and then what kind of influence he had on you at your early coaching stops, like at Dartmouth, Penn State, Stony Brook, things like that.
Yeah, well, hold on, because here comes the Dom Starsia love fest. So
don't worry, Lars. I'll make sure there's equal time on that. Okay, so you go ahead and love Dom. I'll take care. I got you covered.
You'll balance this. That's good. You go to Brown University, you're going to change the world, right? Maybe AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, do some great for the world. And in my way, I'm going to go into teaching. So I was a secondary school, 9th through 12th grade teacher. And fortunately, I was able to opportunity to coach football and lacrosse, my first job out. And I really liked it. And I almost felt a little guilty. Like, the world doesn't need another football lacrosse coach. But I look back to the relationship that I had with Dom, that we all had with Dom, how he impacted us and created this this gang that we were of Brown lacrosse players, how much fun we had together. And he brought together a tremendous talent, but the camaraderie we have and still have today. I mean, here we are on this podcast. It was something like, wow, when you can do that for people, there is a need. And so that was first and foremost what got me into coaching. And so when I finished up the high school teaching and coaching out in California and I came back east, I dove into college lacrosse coaching. And all along the way, starting at Lemoyne and then moving on to Washington and Lee and then Dartmouth, et cetera, I was always checking in with Dom, trying not to be over demanding of his time. He's running his programs and trying to do what he needs to do to be successful and winning his championships. But whenever I could grab a few moments on the phone or in person at the convention or a recruiting trip, it was invaluable to me. Just this being around him and gaining some insight and just being around him anyways, even if there wasn't any gems coming out. I worked on a master's degree when I was at Lemoyne in education. And for my thesis, I was allowed to make some balance to try to dive into with some coaching principles. And I remember I was interviewing some coaches, Sid Jameson being one of them, Coach Dave Urich at the time. He was at Georgetown, tremendously successful at Hobart. And I was interviewing Dom as well. And one of them, I was asking the questions, Dom, how do you balance the job with family? How do you, as a coach? And what do you go? And I just remember Dom saying, I make my family a part of my job. They accept that being a lacrosse coach is wife and children. You are part of the Brown or Virginia lacrosse program. And it just, that type of understanding of what it's really going to take, but Dom was willing to share with me and share with us. And it's so true what he was able to give to me. So all along the way, he's been there. And so now to really direct it, and I'm getting long-winded here, I know, dog, but in 2016, when Dom steps away from his position and it's open here in Charlottesville, Virginia, it's really important for me emotionally and personally to talk to Dom about this. This is a really tough time for Dom. And that man, Dom could not have taken the higher road, despite all the pain and the hurt and everything that was going on. When he spoke with me, he kept it, sort of, let's balance the things. What are your options here, Lars? And he encouraged me to do it. He said, hey, this is a great job here. And despite what was going on with the people there, he took himself above the fray and gave me really sound, sage advice. So thank you, Dom.
Yeah. But hey, Lars, it's so interesting what you say, because Dom, I don't know if I've said this to you before, but one of my vivid memories of playing for you was Easter Sunday. And to your point of lacrosse, your family being about the program, it's Easter Sunday. That's a family day, but we don't get to go home because we're in the middle of the season. And Dom would have the whole team over to his house for a cookout. And I do remember, while Dom, I wasn't particularly reflective back then, as you know, I remember thinking, look at this guy. Like, this is his only day off. It's Easter and the team is at his house. And going back to what you say about wins, Dom, that's another sign to me of the positivity. There's no way we weren't going to play hard for you because we knew you cared about us. And so you could hold us to a higher standard because we knew that you cared about the team. And so I really remember that and took that with me. And Lars, it's interesting you talk about that summer of 2016, because Dom, I think you said this earlier, right? You kind of can't make up the relationship and the connections you and Lars have had over time, right? And you play lacrosse and then become the head coach at Brown, where you go on to recruit Lars, as you say, as this last minute recruit who would have been at Clarkson, He goes on to become the head coach at Brown, and then your immediate successor at Virginia. I mean, nobody would believe that storyline, And so Lars just reflected on what you meant to him during that time. What was that like for you, when perhaps no greater sign of relationship and positivity than the support you gave Lars during that summer of 16?
Yeah, and we both were head coaches at Brown for 10 years, which is also went 10 years at Brown and then came to Virginia. And so there's a lot of irony there. And the winning matters, frankly. The winning over the years, both at Brown and at Virginia, the winning, sometimes I'm not that happy about it, but it enhances the relationships. I don't think there's any doubt about that. One time I was working in Rotelli's camp out in Chris Rotelli, whose father was a classmate of mine at Brown out in San Francisco. I was speaking to the camp and the parents, and I was talking about how it's about the relationships and this and that, and the wins and losses don't matter. And Mike Presser was sitting next to me, and he gives me a little elbow and says, hey, that's easy to say when you've won 4 championships. And so I'm mindful of my language, is that I don't diminish the success over the years, which I think has contributed to a lot of these sort of good intentions and things like that. When it came to 2016 and I decided to step away, and Lars, I was talking to Lars at the time, and we had just, like he mentioned, we had always just talked over the years and stuff. And when he told me that he was interested in the job, I tried to help him. What I was able to do with that, I was actually thinking about this earlier today. I think what happened at that time was that I was able to separate my support for Lars from what was going on at UVA. And so if I put the two together, it might have been more problematic, but I just always been supportive of Lars. And so when he was asking me, should I get involved or what's the job entail, blah, 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 I was able to just I was talking to Lars, that's all. And in the end, while it was a little bit of a rough ride, perhaps for a while there, Lars coming here has kept me connected to the program in a way in which I wouldn't have been with anybody else coaching. And I know a lot of good guys in the world, and one of them might have gotten this job and we would have remained friendly, but I wouldn't have had the relationship with anyone else that I have with Lars as the head coach at Virginia. And so it's taken a little time, but I'm sort of working my way back into the program. And so it's just neat having Lars there. And he's been very respectful and very helpful in terms of transitioning to this life after college lacrosse. And
That's
so
it's great, Dom. I think recently you brought your boys from the Blue Ridge School team out to a practice. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was really kind of fun. And, I hadn't really been to a practice in all, the years since I left. I don't think I'd been to a full practice. I'd been around the practice field a couple of times, but I hadn't stood there and watched the whole time. And there were, as I mentioned to you, Jay, there were some striking similarities, I felt like, to all my Brown years and Virginia years coaching and all. There was a little irreverence on the practice field, guys kind of yapping at each other. I like that. I work with the softball coach here at Virginia. She called me and asked me if I'd be her jobs coach, so I go over and watch softball practice. When I went and watched the first practice, and the program hasn't been that successful, I went over and watched the first practice. When the practice was over, I said to her, in 42 years of coaching college lacrosse, I've never had a practice as organized as that, what I just watched. But I said to her, and I bet what I've been trying to say to her is, it's not just about that. It's about getting people engaged. It's about enthusiasm. It's about guys getting after each other a little bit, so
you tell her to say it's another great day in America?
Well, no, Lars doesn't. Well, Lars was yapping too. And so I was just struck by the similar, they got after each other. They did some things that I couldn't do with my Blue Ridge because I only have half as number of kids. They were doing some ground ball drills that were, somebody was going to get killed and I can't afford to do that. But it was also eye-opening for my players, the Blue Ridge players, because they could see and hear some of the same things that I yap at them about at Blue Ridge, and they have no basis for understanding, but then they had a chance to see it actually, and it's very different than going to watch a game. I was at University of Richmond last week for a practice, and I told the team, I went out and spoke to the team, and I said, this is where the practice field. This is where you establish the culture of the program. I said, Saturdays are Saturdays. That's when you get to show your stuff to the public, but this is where it is. This is where it happens. And so for me, relative to everything that we've been talking about here, convincing you guys that this is where we needed to make our effort. We need to get after this every day. It has to be enjoyable though, that I'm always telling guys, hey, you're allowed to smile on the practice field, and get after it and stuff. And again, Jay, related to what we talked about earlier about language, I'm telling young people that aspire to be leaders and captains, I said, you need to make yourself easy to listen to. You're somebody that I'm going to be a leader. And so I'm going to scream at my teammates, consistently. We all know that guy, screaming about let's go or, this. I don't want to hear that. I'd rather, like I said, say something meaningful in a positive way. People will be willing to listen to you and you'll become more of a leader down the line and stuff. And so anyway, and even after Lars took over here, we've continued to talk, even though I was working through my own issues in terms of a relationship with the program. Lars and I would have continued to talk. I'll tell you, one of the most gratifying moments was when the phone rang 7:00 in the morning of the day after the semifinal game. I forget what year that was, Lars. And they just won in the semifinals. They're about to play in the finals. And he essentially called me up and said, okay, now what?
That's great.
So
I've been here. You've been here. That's great.
I tried to give them the best advice I could. And I think that might have been the year that they went on to win their first championship, So anyway.
So Dom,
cool.
If I could interrupt there, was that you taking credit for Lars's first national championship? Is that what?
Hey, dog, at this point in my life, never mind my career, I'll take whatever credit I can garner. And so
I want to, if I can just pause here for a second. All this talk about you and your positivity and language. I was a bigger than normal player. let's just say.
Really? Is that how you describe yourself?
That's why portly, Tom, maybe portly. And I mean, I just was wondering if this positivity was consistent, that for 4 years on every single road trip, when I got on the bus, you'd scream, Dom, dog. One box
lunch.
One box lunch, dog. I mean, is that the kind of positive reinforcement that we should be looking towards, Dom? Is that
absolutely? If you go and Google sense of humor and toughness, you will find that that's related to it all. Having a good sense of humor, you know enough to laugh about it. Everybody got a kick about it. It's a story that we still remember. And dog, it hit home, baby. It was exactly the right thing to say at that moment.
I'm just trying to paint a full picture for our listeners.
I got you.
You hear on one side it's language, but with me it's a sense of humor. Just a sense of humor.
Can I go back and say one thing too, though? Is that these things are generally not absolutes, language every moment and stuff. It's not that. It's generally the world is a little bit gray, because I use the example all the time. If I'm in the driveway with my 4-year-old and the ball is rolling out toward the street, I'm not saying to him, consider your options, I am saying to him, do not go in the street, and so there are, you shade these things a little bit. It's not perfect. You're doing the best you can. And you guys, the players, understand that coach is trying and don't always get it right, but you're doing the best you can, and people begin to trust you. So that even if you go over the line, because I need to make sure you don't take more than one box lunch, dog.
I couldn't miss out on my lunch. That's great.
Hey, now
Don,
Jay.
Let's transition a little, Ron. Right now, we have many short video clips for your son or daughter to take a look at to help them improve as well online. So you could follow us at jmcmahonlax23 on Instagram, and that's spelled just the letter J, MCMAHONLAX23. The number 23 on Instagram, or you can go to the J McMahon Lacrosse Facebook page. That's JAYMCMAHON, if I can remember how to spell my own name, Lacrosse, on Facebook. And again, you'll find very helpful videos on there, as well as on our YouTube channel at J McMahon Lacrosse, videos for your son and or daughter. And today's skill of the week is shooting on the run. Shooting on the run is easily the most important skill for a lacrosse player who is looking to separate themselves from the pack, so to speak. So on this video, it is about 2.5 to 3 minutes long. It goes into pretty good detail on the elements where you want to maintain your deception, maintain your accuracy, and how you can compensate for what tends to be a decrease in velocity when we are shooting on the run. So we will attach that to the description here, and you can check that out, and also check that out on our YouTube channel. Now, next up is our Mindset Minute with Dr. Rob Gilbert. And today's Mindset Minute is regarding trust. You can tell the great relationships that Coach Starsia and Coach Tiffany build with their players, and it all starts with trust. A little story from Dr. Rob Gilbert. He says, Water, Fire, and Trust were walking through the woods, and as they were walking along, they said to each other, hey, what are we going to do if we get lost? How will we find each other? And Fire says, well, if you lose me, just look for the smoke. Then you'll know where I am. And Water says, if you lose me, just look for the green grass. That's how you'll find me. And then Trust says, if you lose me, don't bother looking, because once I'm gone, I never return. And what that story gets at is the fact that, trust is so important in all the relationships we have in our lives. And one of the mottos that I know Coach Starsia and Coach Tiffany live by is to build trust and develop relationships. And one of the things Dr. Rob Gilbert talks about on how we can do that is, number one, is to just be yourself and be authentic. Number two is to be honest. And along with that, have integrity. So being honest is admitting, when you've made a mistake. Nobody's perfect. And having that integrity, doing what you say you're going to do. That is so important for any relationship, particularly when you're forming a relationship with either your children or with young athletes. And 4, he talks about you always want to be able to take steps to show that you care and take steps to connect with your athletes or with your children. Things that you can connect on, you follow up on, you're able to continue to build a relationship with them, develop that camaraderie. As Coach Starsia is saying, having that almost relaxed, irreverent kind of approach can be very productive, particularly when you're in a tense situation, either coaching in practice or in games. So I hope that Mindset Minute helps for all of our listeners out there. Thank you. That's great.
Hey,
now
Dom,
Jay. Yeah, let's
Jay.
transition a little, Ron, right?
All right. So our next listener writes in, Tom D from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania says, tell us about how you handled the pregame jitters before the 2019 NCAA championship game down in Philadelphia and how it almost made you miss the.
It's interesting. Tom D's asked this question because he knows exactly where I was. I was behind his boat on a water ski. So Tom Dwyer lives in Philadelphia. And when we earned a spot into the Final Four, he and we had talked about, how cool it'd be to go water skiing. And we looked at the schedule and we were playing Duke in the first game of the semifinals and the opening faceoffs at noon. And I said, Tom, that's cutting it a little tight. Then obviously we were fortunate enough to win. And then besides calling Dom at 7 a.m. the next morning to say, okay, now what do we do here, Dom?
Was this part of Dom's advice?
No, Dom, this was not Dom's advice. I didn't ask.
I never went water skiing during a Final Four.
You might not be the only
So I reached out to Dwyer and said, how about tomorrow? The face-off's at 1. That's an extra hour. I think that extra hour is the window we need here to pull this off. And so grabbed an Uber, met him up on the Schuylkill. And he dropped his boat in.
No chance of debris on the Schuylkill. I mean, that's a safe place. Got kegs floating down the river. And
it's
giant
It's
branches.
not for blue bloods. It's the Schuylkill's not water skiing for blue bloods. So interestingly enough, a Yale lacrosse alum, Carl Weimer, was on the boat as well. Another one of those guys that Dom assigned me to guard. Like the guy was 6'4", 220. Shouldn't Sheehan have been on him? Or Trudell? But anyways, so. It wasn't until my second run behind the boat that morning that Dwyer got a little nervous. Like, what happens if Lars gets hurt here? So he ended the session there, drove me back. I didn't have to Uber. He drove me back downtown, his vehicle with the boat behind it. And as I jumped out of the vehicle, some Virginia lacrosse parents shook their head like, you're kidding me. No, that didn't just happen, did it? So it was a great way to relax.
Dom, just to be clear, Dwyer would have had to get another engine on that boat to pull your ass out of the river. I mean, come on. All right, Jay, we got two of the biggest names in lacrosse with us here today.
We do.
So let's ask some questions that have Dom and Lars sharing a little bit of that wisdom with our listeners. Jay, you want to kick off this segment?
Sure. Now, Dom, you were known for being an incredible recruiter, and so much change involved around the college recruiting, like during your career, and you're closely in touch with this whole situation, obviously currently. So we've got a lot of high school and club travel coaches who are trying to get their players noticed and recruited and to play at the college level, and the parents and the players all involved. And what kind of advice would you give people in that situation, boys and girls and coaches?
Yeah, the coaches, there's so much lacrosse now all around the country, and college coaches, in the days when kids used to come and sit in my office and say to me, oh, you're not going to recruit me, I'm from Georgia or I'm from Texas. So that's a bunch of baloney. College coaches are completely myopic. All we care about is winning, getting the best players that we possibly can. I don't care where you're from. But there are so many more areas now that people need to get to and stuff. And so I'm talking to my Blue Ridge players now about reaching out to the college coaches early on to cast a wide net that you can write to people in your sophomore year. And you can even say in your email, in your introductory email, if you want, I know you can't write back to me, which shows a level of awareness of what the rules are and stuff, but you're putting your name in front of these coaches and all. Going to events, it used to be in the old days, you remember, Jay, you had to go to the 205 or you had to go to Blue Chip, those events don't exist any longer. There are so many events now, and every person that runs one of these events says it's the can't miss events of the year, and so I tell young people and parents, pick out a couple, it doesn't matter which ones they are, pick out a couple that work with your schedule and aren't going to bankrupt your family, and then again, write to the college coaches and say, coach, I'm going to be at this tournament. It's happening on these days. I'm going to be playing with this team. I'm going to be wearing this jersey number. They happen to know the schedule of the games. Make their life as easy as you possibly can. And again, the victory email, make it succinct. I don't want to hear about, I'm very coachable. Well, that's the first sign that you're not coachable, that you think you are. I don't want to hear what a hard worker you are. You have no idea. You're in 10th grade. You have no idea what college coaches are, what college players are doing and stuff. But I am interested that, hey, I'm the starting tailback on the football team. I'm the starting point guard. I center halfback in soccer or play basketball, those kind of. So give the coaches that kind of information. A little thing about your grades. I got a A- average, and then let the coaches do their job. These college guys are good at what they do, and what parents are guilty of more than anything else is overthinking the process. They want to get it perfect, and there's no perfect. Again, do the best you can. Pick out a couple of events. Cast a wide net when you're writing to coaches. Get some video stuff so you can include a video highlight on your email. You don't need an expensive recruiting service. These kids can do this now on their own. And I don't want a 15-minute video. I don't have the time for that. But give me 5 minutes and put your best stuff at the front of the video. Don't save it till the end because I might not get to the 5-minute mark.
Right.
So show it to me early. And I can tell you stories. There was a fellow we had at UVA here, Colin Briggs, first team All-American midfielder for us. And I recruited him he sent me like a 15-second video clip. And I could see in that right there that, wow, this kid had a special split dodge, and that's exactly what it was, actually. I yelled in the office to Coach Van Arsdale. I said, Mark, get over here. And we watched it, and they said, yeah. I called him up, and it started in recruiting, and it happened, and he came to Virginia and stuff. And so the college coaches know what they're doing. You got to trust them a little bit. Parents, you're not going to dot every I and cross every T. You do the best you can, and then let the college coaches do their job. But also cast a wide net early. You're writing to coaches. These young men and women are very good at the computer stuff. You send out to a lot of different coaches in a lot of different places, and then be good enough. That's the bottom line. If you're good enough, somebody's going to find you. There's not a lot of guys playing lacrosse that are good enough to play at Virginia that Lars doesn't know about. Somebody's calling him up and saying, you ought to see this kid down in Georgia. He's unbelievable. Well, that's the kid that could play at Virginia or Carolina or one of those big schools, the kid from Texas or California. I was out I was out at Rotelli's camp, and when I was talking to the parents, I said, if you want to know if your son can play at the big schools back east, just answer this one question. Is my son one of the best athletes at the high school? Period. Because in California, in places, the game is still a little bit of a skateboard sport. Kid skateboards to practice. He's the leading scorer on a team. He skateboards home. Life is good. That's not who Lars is interested in. Lars is interested in the starting tight end or the starting tailback or the center midfielder or one of those guys. Those are the kind of guys that are going to play at the high end in Division I. And
that is great advice, Dom. I bet listeners really appreciate that.
So, Lars, let's turn to you. There's no place you haven't evaluated players, club tournaments, showcases, all-star games, high school games. What are you looking for most in those situations? And how can young players put their absolute best foot forward in those kind of settings?
Find out what Coach Tiffany's answer was on our next session.
We'll delete that, Lars. We'll delete that.
Okay, good. We stopped recording, right, Ron?
Oh, well,
yeah.
We're going to cut that. We promise we will keep the cameras and the audio rolling, and no, we did not cut that. And until we meet again, here's to hoping you find the twine. We're signing off here. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our Get the Lac Scoop podcast. Also, you can check out videos at our Facebook page at J. McMahon Lacrosse or on Instagram at jmcmahonlax23, or check out our full podcast with video on our YouTube channel along with the video of the week. Next time, where we will be having our final session with Coach Starsia and Coach Tiffany, getting Lars's answers to those questions we asked and many more tips on practice and on recruiting. And as Coach Starsia used to say to us, take care of yourselves, take care of each other.